This is a production of PBS Charlotte.
The following episode of Charlotte, a City of International Success, is brought to you by Central Piedmont Community College and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Coming up next on Charlotte, a City of International Success, I will interview Carlos Salum. We're going to talk about a very crucial topic, leadership performance strategy, which is extremely important in today's world. Stay with us. Welcome to Charlotte, a City of International Success. I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Today, our guest is Carlos Salum. He is a leadership performance strategist. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
And it's a pleasure to have you because I had a chance to chat with you before the show, and I was amazed at the background of your family. So to start with, you're from?
Argentina, Buenos Aires.
Oh, okay. Isn't that a big cosmopolitan city?
One of the biggest.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow, a lot of diversity, I would think.
A lot. 60% Italian immigration from the wars, then Spanish, the next contingent, and then the rest of the world.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. What a nice place to be brought up, you know.
Yes, it's very similar to Charlotte.
Oh, really?
In weather, and you can play tennis.
Oh, you have your priorities going.
Is the connection.
That's great. And also when we were talking, you talked about your grandparents. So you're not like Spanish.
No.
Okay, so talk to me about your grandparents, where they're from.
My family is Lebanese and French.
Lebanese and French.
Yes, my father's family is Lebanese. They immigrated around 1910.
Yeah.
My grandfather was 15 years old, had to leave because they were a very large family and they had run out of money. And through contacts with a priest, there was an opportunity to go to Rome, but there was disease, yellow fever, an epidemic in different parts of the world. So the ship kept going to Buenos Aires. My Lebanese grandmother had a similar story, but through New York. And Ellis Island was closed, and the ship had to go to Buenos Aires. So
really?
It was a very difficult time for immigrants, but Buenos Aires was very welcoming.
Yeah.
And without language, without money, just with a few contacts in the Lebanese community, they continued their life there. And my grandfather, became a businessman, an entrepreneur, had shops, and they had 3 children.
Okay.
My father first, who became a doctor in chemistry, and 2 sisters.
Your father became doctor in chemistry?
Yes.
Oh, that is a hard subject to become a doctorate in, okay.
Yeah, so the first one to go to university probably in the entire family, entire lineage.
That.
And on my mother's side, they were French, and they had gone to Argentina to build railroads. And they have been very successful.
Wow.
So they had a fortune and many children, but the older brothers decided to gamble their money in France, and they lost most of it. And my grandfather, the little one, was left with all the women. To survive, he could not study, but through sheer effort and dedication and responsibility, he became the president of the National Electric Company without a degree.
That is amazing.
Both sides of my family are marked by grit, in a way, an entrepreneurial vision.
Entrepreneur, yeah.
So.
Wow. Now, your father, you said, is PhD in chemistry?
Yes.
And then what did your mother do?
My mother was also a doctor in chemistry.
Doctor in chemistry, both of them?
The French side, my grandfather was because he had to fight so much for getting ahead, he basically mandated that all his children, 5, would have PhDs. And they all did.
Wow.
So you had 2 doctors in chemistry, 1 physicist, a lawyer, and an engineer. And my mother worked in the National Academy of Medicine.
Yeah.
After being 1 year at the Institut Pasteur in France on
Yeah.
a scholarship, and work on genetics, the genetics of leukemia and hemophilia, and published internationally. But she wanted to be an artist.
She wanted to be an artist?
Which she became afterwards, you know, when she
Really?
retired.
What a fine balance of the brain.
Yes.
Really? What, now, you know, it amazes me. In those days, I didn't think getting a doctorate degree is a norm. Am I right?
True. Women had a very defined role in the family, and it was thanks to my free-thinking grandfather, who had said 50 years before it happened, in this country, in Argentina, there will be divorce one day, although the Catholic Church, you know, was stopping that from happening. And he wanted the women in his family to have degrees and be independent. So I was truly a visionary in that sense.
Education and independence.
Yes, financially independent through education. So my parents met at the university, and it was a very good combination because although they were both in chemistry, they had different nuances in their approaches to life and personalities. And I grew up in a very rich and universalistic, you know, basically diversity looking and international
thinking.
International thinking family,
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a great opportunity to have a family like that. Now, do you have any siblings or?
I have a brother.
Younger, older?
1 year. I'm older by 1 year and 3 months. We both had a Catholic education at a school that has this particular approach that they told us on the first day, one day all of you will lead this country. No pressure there.
No pressure at all.
But the education was very good. It was truly more than information, was education, very much in tune with my family's direction. Internationally diverse, curiosity, exploration, not just getting grades or learning to get a job.
How nice.
You know, what can you become? You know, what is your mark in the world? That was very important to me, going through that. No?
It was, it sounds like a well-rounded approach. Because most of the time when you go to schools, it's academic. You know, get your A's, you know, do your tests well. And primarily that's where the focus is. If you want extracurricular, you need to go outside to get it. So what you're saying is at the Catholic school, you really had an opportunity to have a well-rounded education, you know, academics, as well as understanding the world, and then probably really motivation to lead the country, be one of the best. I think to even instill that in a child, I think it's a wonderful way of motivating children.
There was one extra element.
Yeah.
There was the possibility of dissent. That was crucial. In the mix among the professors, there were some revolutionaries, or some people who thought completely different from the French brothers and anybody else. And that was very, very important. It's like putting salt and pepper in the salad, you know? You need something prickly so you don't become dogmatic about the way you look at things. These guys were there to show us a tangent. For example, the literature professor, which inspired me, because then I could have been many things. I was at the top of my class. I was a class president because I was very diplomatic. I could talk to power. But I wanted to be a writer.
You wanted to be a writer?
Because this guy in particular had shown me that there was a possibility of something else. And I think that that was very important.
Is writing, is that because you can express your thoughts freely? Or is it you can influence others through writing? Why did you want to become a writer?
My makeup, I learned later, that the way that my brain works is I am of the future. I am very idealistic. So I had to find a way to express this aspect of possibility of what can be. I cannot be content with what is. So writing was a very good way, and because I had started reading very early, even before going to proper school.
Yeah, I believe that with two
kindergarten,
parents with doctorate degrees.
no, I was already enamored with what was happening in my head when I was reading.
Yeah.
The fact that you create a movie in your head. And then as a kid you try to act out and
Sure.
play act. And I think that factor through literature has become central to me because of what happened afterwards in my life. I mean, the fact that I could really start practicing the craft.
Did you pursue your writing career then?
My first professional choice in the
Yeah.
middle of a brutal dictatorship that was actually eliminating intellectuals was writing. And I entered the university with very good grades, but every day through the first 6 months I saw people disappearing around me. And my father said, I don't think this is healthy. Why don't you try law first? So I had this brief period of working at the tribunal, but I saw terrible things coming in front of me that were not resolved because the justice was sort of curtailed.
That is scary.
And a friend said, who was a doctor,
Yeah.
said, listen, medicine is an art. And I said, oh, really? Yeah, it's not so much science. Let me show you. He showed me beautiful Chinese and Japanese books of the medical arts, and I said, I'll give it a shot. And that's how I ended up with 6 years of medicine.
Oh, so you did 6 years of
6
medicine.
years of medicine.
How many years is the total for medicine in?
They had shifted from a program of 5 years to a program of 7, and I ran out of steam because the infrastructure had been devalued and my professors were demoralized, and the dictatorship had done a lot of damage to the middle class and the possibilities in education by defunding and misspending. So tennis, which I had played all my life.
So before you go there,
Yeah.
so did you drop out of medicine?
I dropped out of medicine after having paid for a trip to Europe with tennis lessons, and I discovered the world. And I came back to medical school and I said, there is a world out there that I need to explore. This is not fun anymore. This is that was a shock.
So you somehow discovered something new.
Yes.
And you felt more passionate about than the medicine that you were trying to make it happen.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I am certain that I could have been a good doctor,
Yeah.
but because you're inserted in a system,
Yeah.
the system has to work and
Yeah.
has to sort of have some steam and
Yeah.
have some oil
Definitely.
in the parts. No, otherwise you feel utilized and you don't.
Yeah.
You cannot make an impact. I mean, you can help a lot of people individually, but you are not part of a, an ensemble that produces
Well, you
results.
have to feel that. You have to
Yeah.
feel the drive. You have to feel the passion.
Yeah.
Over and over again, everybody says you can never really succeed if you don't have the passion and the drive
Yes.
for the field, whatever you choose.
Yes.
So obviously, the tennis triggered something in you.
The tennis triggered the exploration of the world and also the idealist. And the disruption was that when you're in medical school and if you remain a doctor, you might have life on a straight line and the white picket fence and the car at the door and two kids, that will work.
Yeah.
But I said, uncertainty is fine. Like in a tennis match, I can figure out 2 steps ahead and then I don't know.
True.
And it's a
Because it
moving
depends on
field.
your
Yeah,
competitor.
exactly. So I said, I'm going to embrace that and I'm going to leave the country
Yeah.
through contacts that I had in tennis. Dennis Vandermeer, the best tennis teacher in the world, invited me to come, and
Wow.
he
What an
had
opportunity.
a similar life. He left South Africa in the same way, and he said, come over, we'll figure it out.
Oh, I like that. It's an
And,
open-ended
exactly.
opportunity.
And
To be
it was
creative.
basically because of that mindset. He was very good at cushion me and teach me entrepreneurship and teach me the business at Hilton Head, which is one of the best sports markets in the world.
Wow.
Within 12 miles, you have anything that you need to learn sports marketing. So
Okay.
that was.
So did you come back to Argentina?
I started going back to visit family, but at some point I met Dr. Jim Lair, sports psychologist.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And on a handshake, I said, I think I can make you world famous. Because when I travel and I certify tennis teachers for the Vandermeer organization, they say, okay, but after this, what happens? And what happens with the mental side? And Jim was developing an approach that was very effective with professional players, was just publishing his first books, and he was very receptive. So we shook hands, and I went to sleep on a sofa with my friends in Dusseldorf, and I didn't speak German for 8 months, and I got 6 cities signed up.
Okay.
Jim landed 8 months later, and we had a very successful tour, and then IMG, the largest sports marketing company in the world that was employing Jim, said, who is this guy? Who is this Houdini that made this happen? And I said, well, if you want me to do this, year after year, let's have the green card, and I'll be based then at the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy in Florida, where he was with all the champions. Agassi, Sampras, Monica Seles, Jim Courier. And the interesting thing was that during that year in Dusseldorf.
So what were you doing actually? I think, you know, tennis is fine, and then you're talking about, are you talking about coaching? Coaching like mentally, or you physically coaching tennis? What exactly are we talking about?
Initially I was coaching at Vandermeer's, physically. Then I started coaching mentally with Jim Lair.
Okay.
Which was a different approach. I mean, you do look at the entire game of the player, but basically it's their emotional responses to pressure.
Okay.
How there are 4 ways of responding. You know, we can basically walk away from pressure, we can get angry, we can choke, or we can embrace the challenge. And that was basically the diagnostic that we were doing with the top players in the world.
Did you then, when did you come to Charlotte?
Charlotte happened.
You're in Charlotte now.
Yeah, basically in the year 2000, and I was, the connection was this, that when I left the tennis world, I had an opportunity to go into the internet startups. That didn't work very well, but we got married with my wife Karen at the time.
Wow.
So
that's a new venture.
Exactly.
You know, that's a lot.
The wedding marked the separation of the tennis life with the business life, and a friend of mine was selling his house in Charlotte and said, you might not buy my house, but you're going to like Charlotte, because we were trapped in Houston, the startups had failed, and it was the end of the internet boom. At that time is when we landed in Charlotte. Of course, it was spring, everything was blooming.
Beautiful.
So Charlotte sold itself. And we rented for a while, but then we were able to buy a house because simultaneously I got a call from my best friend in the world, with whom we had made a pact in Buenos Aires that we would leave Argentina together, he would go to Switzerland, I would come to the States, and then we would succeed.
That's your best friend.
And we had done that, and I said, okay, now there is a chance to work together. Come to Zurich and help me train the Swiss bankers that I'm leading, like you train the professional tennis players. Because I get the system, I understand what is involved, and I want them to be corporate athletes. I want them to...
I like that word.
Exactly.
Corporate athletes.
Yeah. So to embrace the growth mindset, to embrace the performance, peak performance mindset, and do the behaviors, understand what is involving creating the rituals and the desire to, as he calls it, go beyond personal best.
I like that concept. So what is involved in really train? This is what you do now, right?
Yes.
And you have a company.
Yes.
What is it called? Salum?
Salum International Resources.
Salum International Resources. So what exactly do you do? Because this seems like a wonderful way to not only, you know, for the corporations to train their people, their leaders, tomorrow's leaders and today's leaders. And especially, I think nowadays, the world is so competitive. I mean, you really need to be top of the crop in order for you to succeed. It is not an opportunity that if you're a normal, mediocre leader,
Yes.
you will not get anywhere, neither will your organization.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about what is this organization, what does it mean by training these corporations, especially the leaders? What do you do? What is it about?
This starts with the idea that as a leader, basically, you have to have figured out the vision.
Okay.
You're going to be preaching and doing the sermon from the mountain.
Sure.
And connecting the future with the present. Your ability to blend what we want to be with what we are is the story that we're telling, so we can recruit our followers to go in the direction of the vision. So that's an important concept because it implies transformation, it implies training, that everybody from the leader to everybody involved will have to be in training because we're on a quest.
Right.
We have to go beyond personal best, we have to grow, we have to compete, but we cannot break down, we cannot burn out. We need to have a desire for this. We need to feel that there is something in it for me individually and for us. So the process is very interesting because when I talk to a leader, they say, yes, that's it. Let's do peak performance. So the sports metaphor is very attractive.
Right.
And feeling like a corporate athlete and what is very...
Sure.
But the leader, very often, within the initial part of the process, say, well, wait, what I really need is meaning in my life. So from achievement, they know that they have to be in balance with meaning and the fulfillment that comes from understanding what are my values. Yeah, why am I doing this? You know,
Wow.
meaning
but
we
you
can
said
start,
something very important here. You also talked about burnout.
Yes.
I think whether it is athletic field, whether it is a professional field, no matter what leadership level you're at, there is a huge burnout factor.
Yes.
People really burn out. They do not have an opportunity to sit back, think, rest, rejuvenate their spirits, rejuvenate their energy so that they have a clarity of mind to actually think clearly. Burnout is a huge issue in almost most of the fields, no matter what level they're at.
Yes.
How do you coach not to burn out?
The key understanding is to look at the week, for example, and see where the stress and recovery waves are. Then you look at your days individually and see which are the focus days, the most stressful days. Can they be followed by a recovery day? Or can they be followed by a buffer day?
Wow.
A recovery day would be, okay, I do much less. A buffer day, okay, I do 3/4 of it, but it's more of thinking, it's not so much on focus, it's not so much like yesterday that was so stressful. So then we can be very granular. We can look at each hour. How much am I doing intensively? Can I now back off? Can I make a wave? The wave could be just standing up and walking out, or making a joke, or breathing exercises, or a bit of exercise by taking up the stairs.
Wow.
So I can plan my entire hour, morning, afternoon, day, and week. I can monitor now my stress and recovery waves. And the immune system is enormously responsive to that. With Jim Lair, we work with a psychoneuroimmunologist who told us what's happening underneath what we were observing. So scientifically, this is important to know that we're training our immune system to be always responsive by not being linear, by not overworking and doing things non-stop. And in some corporations, the problem is that overworking is a badge of honor or is a duty to show the others and keep your post, you know. And that's something that needs to be understood by leadership. That stress recovery, it takes you long-term, it sustains the vision and improves productivity, you know.
You really covered something extremely important, that is this recovery. Stress and recovery. Everywhere I go, everybody I talk to, that is the primary thing that's affecting their health,
Yes.
affecting, creating diseases, creating issues with the family and friends,
Yes.
creating issues with your colleagues.
Yes.
It's affecting the entire life.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that somebody like you and your team is really, looking into the primary thing that's burning out
Yes.
and that's affecting, our leadership.
Yes.
So what else? Are there any qualities? Probably maybe a minute. But what qualities people need to have, or education or training to really do what you're doing?
First, you have to have a passion
Yeah.
for curiosity. I mean, you have to engage as a curious
yeah.
person, because, like I did, you can use a metaphor
Yeah.
of a passion like tennis, in my case,
Yeah.
and understand what makes that work. What makes a champion be a champion?
Yeah.
Does it translate to other activities, to life in general?
Yeah.
And because in the case of sports or dance or the arts is related to the body and emotions, the translation works, because we all need to understand the stress recovery works,
Yeah.
the stress recovery waves that actually deliver peak performance. But beyond that, of course, one can study leadership, but not to engage for a job. I would say, what can you learn through
Yeah.
this to make an impact? How am I going to resonate? Because just to be employed, which
Yeah.
is very nice,
Very nice, but that's not.
but in leadership performance, and then being able to offer strategies to leaders, it will require to look at those components of achievement, fulfillment, meaning, significance, and are they leaving a legacy?
Are they leaving a legacy?
Right. So that is the key.
Talking about leaving the legacy, I think in this field you're definitely going to leave a legacy, because it's a very important field, very crucial to our community, very crucial to our country, as well as really any leader that's trying to achieve something. So thank you so much. It's such a great topic, and thank you for being on our show today.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Charlotte, a city of international success. I'm Dr. Maha Gingrich. Please join us again next time, right here on WTVI PBS Charlotte.
A production of PBS Charlotte.